Hey, this is Jack, and this video is called 3 Things That You Should Never Say to a Guy. Hey, welcome to my channel. If you're new here or returning, I'm glad you're here. Please click subscribe if you haven't joined us. I release videos more than once a week on dating, authenticity, personal growth, and how we can be better in our relating together. So I'd love to have you with us. Now, today's video is 3 things you shouldn't say to a guy. Let's get right into this. So the first thing is in the territory of your ex. And this is to not make a negative comparison between him and your ex. So for instance, we don't want you saying, well, my ex would have done ABC, or my ex would have said ABC, as if those things are comparatively better things than what your current partner is doing. So we really want to be out of the business of negative comparison with your ex. And there's a couple of good reasons for this, right? One is it's genuinely hurtful and not a positive contribution to your current relationship to be making comparisons with someone else. If you have something that you need to communicate, and it just so happens that maybe that was something you felt your ex did well, I don't think you need to include the bit about your ex doing it well. You can just make the request, right? Hey, I wish we spent more time going to the beach, or I'd love for us to find more intimate ways to have date nights together. Do you think we can see a little bit less of your family in the coming weeks, right? So learn how to make requests, not demands or expectations or covert comparisons with some other time. The second reason that this is important is because it's going to keep you in the present, right? One of the seductions of the nostalgia of your ex is that it takes you into the there and then, it takes you into the past, and you start rehashing memories and kind of eating emotions from the past. So as much as possible, we want to have you present. So irrespective of your guy, this is typically good for you, right? It stops you pedestaling your ex, which is a common problem, right? Imagining that your ex is so wonderful, We say this bluntly, if your ex is so wonderful, he would be here right now, right? Unless, tragically, your ex passed away or you're widowed or some such. But in most of these situations where I see people making this comparison with their ex, it's not because their ex is no longer on the planet. It's because it didn't work out. And that's totally allowed, right? It doesn't work out sometimes. That's part of life. But it doesn't get better by you imagining that it was better than it was and remembering all the things you really liked and kind of diminishing all the things that you didn't, keeping your ex up here on some kind of pedestal and then doing a negative comparison with the persons in front of you. You have a real person in front of you that's trying to relate with you. Let's see how you can maximize your opportunities there. All right, so the second thing that you shouldn't say to a guy, and I will put one caveat as I get into this, is I don't trust you, right? I don't trust you. Now, the caveat is, if this is a real experience for you through time and not some heat of the moment thing, then of course you could say something like this. Although, let's just be blunt and sober. If you really through time don't trust your ex, there's me. Don't do comparison with your ex, Jack of 2 minutes ago. Jack now. Let's talk about your ex, even when I'm not trying to talk about your ex. Oh, gosh. If you really don't trust your partner, then you probably shouldn't be in with them, right? If that's like a through time chronic issue, it would be hard for you to be in relationship with them. And unless there's some kind of specific path that you're both on to perhaps rebuild trust, say after cheating or infidelity, and you're both up for doing that work together, then good on you. But if it's just a through time experience that you don't trust them, then you might say, well, I don't trust them because I have trust issues and I'm working on my trust issues. There might be some nuance in that territory. But I would find different ways of expressing that own more of the experience of your tendency to find trust difficult, right? So you can use language like, I don't feel very trusting of myself right now, or I notice I feel particularly vigilant, or I notice that my trust in this moment is lowered or diminishing, right? Now, they may seem countercultural ways for you to speak, but there's a difference between saying, I don't trust you, and right now I'm having an experience called I'm trusting less. And all of us, by the way, will have modulations in how much trust we experience, even for people that we do trust through time and consider mostly trustworthy. And this can just be another way, like using your present continuous tense, right? I'm not feeling so much trust right now, is a way of owning your experience and not just blaming the other person. Because quite often when we are experiencing less trust, it's not just objectively speaking that we should be experiencing that, right? Typically something is happening in the dynamic or over there, and then we're having a subjective interpretation of that, and part of the interpretation often might have us in the experience of feeling lowered trust, right? So it's okay to say that, and you could also create, this doesn't just have to be an intimate relationship, you could create with anyone a shared reality and a context within which you can say things like, I notice I feel a little less trusting right now, right? Or hearing you say XYZ has me feel a little less trusting. That's owning your experience, right? That is not criticizing or blaming the other person or accusing them of not being trustworthy, right? There's a difference between saying, I'm feeling lowered trust and you are not trustworthy, right? So this is all good practice to help us distinguish our own experience and to stay as rooted as possible in our own experience with the minimum assumption and conclusion about other people. And this is challenging, right? So I'm not saying you're going to be able to do this perfectly. None of us can. And it's a worthy path of practice. And you can start where you are. Part of this is having the sobriety that what you feel in each moment is a kind of truth, right? It's a subjective experience. And if you are authentically tracking your experience, that is your experience. But that doesn't mean that it's a stabilized through time truth, right? And for any of us, at any point that we're in our more feminine side, so this would be particularly true of you if you are a feminine essence woman, you probably will find that there are lots of modulations in how you feel, that there's times that you're opening, you're closing, and this is a dynamic that goes throughout your day, depending on circumstances, your mood, emotions, what's happening around you, your hormones, and many things. So none of this is making that wrong. It's actually great that you're tracking that. It's just inviting you to have a little bit of space and patience around your experience so you don't make definitive conclusions about other people based upon something in the now, right? Like in the same way, I'm super sensitive to weather. I think I would have been a weather man in prehistoric times. That would have been my job maybe. Weather and the climate are different, right? So the weather changes, I feel something. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to feel it in 4 hours when the front has moved through or something's changed. So being able to distinguish this is an in the moment experience from this is a true experience for me through time that I have introspected, metabolized, and reflected upon. And yeah, I'm having the experience called I don't trust you. You have a right to that experience. Obviously, none of this is saying go trust a guy that's not worthy of your trust. It's just saying, hey, slow it down because you might create more rift and need to repair than is necessary based upon something that's happening in the moment rather than it actually being a through time stabilized reality for you. So partly I'm drawing attention to this, I trust you, because on the flip side, this is one of the core needs that most men or anyone that has a more masculine essence may have, right? And sometimes this is even more important for guys to hear than I love you and I respect you, is actually that I trust you, right? I trust that you're here, that you're showing up, that you mean well, that you're looking out for me, you're securing the scene, that it's okay to be around you, you're safe to be around. So this is really nourishing for the core essence of the masculine to hear. Again, none of this is about giving it willy-nilly or when it's not true for you, right? So none of this is about you disconnecting from your truth. It's just saying if you go the other side of that, like I don't trust you, that is pretty meaningful in most guys' worlds. So I'm just saying use it meaningfully and sparingly rather than impulsively or because in the moment something's had you close and you're reacting out against that. And hey, sometimes it might happen and that's the best that you can do and you can go try to clean it up afterwards. That's also allowed, right? We're not trying to go for perfect practice. We are humans, we're messy, we sometimes are impulsive. But if you know that's your tendency, that perhaps you get triggered by something and then you're suddenly feeling lowered trust for the people around you, this is for you in those non moments of that, to have a little sobriety and to kind of set yourself up, knowing that might happen, to say something that's actually going to get you closer to what you need. You don't want to get into an argument about whether this person's trustworthy if it's an in the moment shift for you. What you might want to say is, gosh, I notice I feel less trusting right now. Could you just hold my hand for a moment? Or could we just stop talking and you just come sit with me in silence? Or could you just give me 1 minute or 5 minutes just to kind of center myself or compose myself? Or could we table this topic and bring it back up when I'm feeling a little bit more centered or we're both more available for it? That's the practice. All right. And then the third thing that you may not want to say to your guy is, I'm leaving, right? I'm leaving. Now, again, like the last point, if this is a stabilized through time or authentic reality for you, of course, you have the right to leave. Right? So let's just put that aside. If this is like really true for you, that you're in consideration wanting to end a relationship, you obviously have the right to do that. And at some point you're going to have to make a communication like this. I'm distinguishing that from the impulse or the threat to leave the relationship because you are angry, frustrated, disappointed, triggered. Right? So again, this is about noticing that when we're in those moments of dysregulation and trigger, sometimes it can be good not to mouth off too much. Sometimes it can be good to have some curiosity about your own experience, right? In the same way that if you're someone that's drunk alcohol in the past, you notice that it affects your way of looking at reality, right? So if something is true for you when you're drunk, but not true for you when you're not drunk, you might think, well, that's not true for me. So if something's true for you when you're triggered, but it's not true for you when you're not triggered, it's probably not true for you. It's true in the context of being triggered, right? Or it's part of your experience in the context of being triggered. We're all going to get triggered at times. So again, we're not making that wrong. We're just saying, when that happens, just like when you're drunk, can I have a little bit of sober presence to notice what I'm about to think, feel, or say may not be fully true. And even if you feel so compelled you have to say it, just using a phrase like, I notice I'm triggered, and so I don't know whether I'm going to believe what I'm about to say, can just create some space for the other person to be in contact with what you're about to say with them, right? So kind of saying, hey, I notice I'm off center, so this might be off center. It encourages some kind of self-awareness in you, and it creates a little bit of space for the other person. Better than saying I'm leaving you, right? If that's not actually what you're trying to communicate definitively, it might be just to say, hey, I'm going to take some space, right? Hey, I need to go find my center because I'm triggered. I need to go just be in the other room, and I am going to close the door just to get into my own energy, but I will be back in 30 minutes. I will be back in contact tonight. I will be back in contact via text message as soon as I feel more regulated. So ideally, we don't leave the other person hanging in the sense that they don't know when we're coming back. Sometimes you might not fully know when you're coming back, so you can promise to communicate. That may or may not sit great with your partner. That might be the best that you can do. Or if that doesn't sit great with them, you can promise to check in at a specific time, even if it doesn't mean that you're fully coming back into contact, right? Yeah, I agree to make contact by 6 p.m. I may not be ready to really be in conversation again, but that's what's going on, right? So a lot of this is about starting to know what our patterns are, and sometimes patterns are specific to the person that you're relating in, right? Because they might bring out a part of you or trigger a part of you that is different. Sometimes it might be gross patterns that you just know, yeah, this is kind of my tendency, that when it gets really hard, or if we get into a certain kind of conflict or argument, there's a part of me that wants to leave, right? So again, even just using that language, right? There's a part of me that wants to leave is different than saying I'm leaving you, right? So notice a lot of this is actually about having the self-humility and awareness that in our moments of heat and trigger, we're normally a little bit out to lunch, right? We're normally not speaking the fullness of our truth. So creating some space around your experience for you and the other person can be really useful. It might be that in that moment you are feeling the heat of anger, right? And part of anger is the energy of separation. So in that moment, part of you might think, wow, this is really true. Yeah, this is so bad, ridiculous, unrepairable that I'm going to leave, right? What might be in that situation better to say is I'm leaving the room, right? Rather than I'm leaving you, I'm leaving the room. I got to go separate. Even if a major part of you in that moment thinks this is it and we're done. What I'm trying to invite is that, okay, if it's really true that you're done, you don't need to say that in this moment, because that will continue to be true. So why not find out if that is still true for you when you've come back to center and you've had some time to metabolize your experience, right? So if the I'm leaving you is really true, you want it to not be true in the heat of an argument. You want it to be true when you can sit down and have a coffee with your partner and say, hey, regretfully, I don't think I can stay in this, right? Because it's not working, or my heart's no longer in it, or whatever's true for you. But you can set that up with time and with appropriate notice to the other person if it's actually, again, a through time truth for you. So please leave me a comment. I read them all. Please hit subscribe if you're not already with us. This is a great community to be part of. And I'd love to know what your experience is. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Does it make sense? Feel free to push back. Be courteous if you can. We try to keep it nice and clean in the comments. But I want to know what your experience is and whether this is helpful for you. And as always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here.